It's not often that you get to ask a UCI world champion how they structure their training, their thoughts on different training zones, periodization, training intensity distributions, time in zone, all of that. And this is what you're going to get with this episode. It's really special with Santa Cruz Hit Squad's Keegan Swenson. I know he's been on the podcast before, but he's usually answering your questions or helping us answer them. And in this case, we're just going direct to him and getting his thoughts on training. This is a really rare insight to get from a pro athlete of this level. And it's a really cool episode. I hope you enjoy it. A couple things to know though. First, number one, this was outside in the backyard at his Airbnb in Bentonville, Arkansas before Little Sugar. As such, there is a lot of background noise going on. So I apologize. It's not like a normal podcast. And second, the camera failed after about, a minute of recording. So it's just going to be audio. We'll have some slideshow images going there for you, but this is just a good listen to hear from a world champion, his thoughts on training, kind of front to back. Super cool. Hope you enjoy it. Keegan Swenson, right here at Little Sugar in Bentonville, Arkansas. We're going to talk about training today because we recently recorded a podcast about sweet spot and tempo training. And you were like, why didn't you have me on?
That's my wheelhouse, man.
That's right. That's right. But first things first, I want to talk a little bit about Little Sugar. And
not tempo or sweet spot. No, this is far from it, unfortunately.
We rode the beginning of the course the other day. And that, I think that this race is going to be, and when you're listening to this, the race has already happened. But, the camera died. Oh, well, the camera's
no video for you guys.
Yeah, no video. It's just audio. We'll just put up some images and run them in a slideshow. This course is like the start. I'm not sure I've ever seen a course of the start's going to be more crucial. It's such a long race.
Yeah, it's pretty important start. And it's a fine balance of, not going so deep that you completely nuke yourself for the next hour, but also still being in a reasonably good position. Like, you don't need to be like, first into the single track or whatever, but you need to be like, if you have any ambitions of winning the race, you can't go in like 20th.
No.
You have to be in a reasonable spot. So
yeah. And it's like from there, it's this grass hill that we start off on. And then after that, it's just going to be, you're locked in. And like whatever position you're in, every pass after that, you take on two risks. Number one, flatting, because you have to go around somebody.
And it's a little extra energy to pass too.
Then that's the other risk. Yeah. And then if you start to add that up, geez, man, sorry for the planes overhead. When you start to add up all those efforts, this is 61 miles of nonstop punches. And you start off the race with like probably what's going to be for me like a 2-minute PR.
Oh, yeah.
Like all out.
It pretty much has been the season 2-minute PR for me the last couple of years.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to have that. And then after that, we have 60 miles or at that point, probably 58 miles of nonstop punching. It's probably the worst advised way to pace an effort, but the absolute way that we just have to do it.
Yeah.
Pace. How much VO2 have you been doing? Because you really drove toward that peak. We joked around, you were like a starved street dog coming into Marathon Worlds. You really ran it to the wire. Were you able to just like rebound and did you just get straight back into VO2 or what sort of training have you been doing since then? Have you needed to go back and rebuild and touch up the foundation with base work?
Yeah. So, after going into Marathon Worlds, it was like just threshold, lots and lots of threshold, a little bit of sweet spot, but mostly like a lot of 8-minute efforts, 10-minute, some shorter stuff, a little bit of VO2 just to kind of touch on it, as I knew there could be a little bit of intensity out there fighting for position or whatever.
Yeah.
So then after Marathon Worlds, went to Schramm again, rested, and then raced. And you were
a bit under the weather too, so
I was a bit sick that week, so it was hard to really judge how the feeling was, But the race itself was a pretty good VO2 effort. Lots of like little hits. So I was like, it's in the worst case, it's a good training day to kind of prepare for this one. And then, went home, rested just for a few days, make sure everything was all healthy and ready to start pushing again. And then got into a little bit of a rebuild. We did a bit of tempo, sweet spot, a lot of like kind of did like a torque block.
When you say torque block, let's get into that.
Yeah.
So that's like, what do you mean when you're saying tempo and sweet spot with
like low cadence stuff? So kind of did a short block of that, which just kind of helps for me. Like I always feel like it helps kind of rebuild the strength a bit, especially when I've been like, light and skinny and just really focusing on the watt per kilo effort. I feel like it helps me like kind of rebuild and then like focus on the VO2. So we did a couple weeks of that and then just a week of VO2. And then some of the torques had like some VO2 sprinkled in. So it wasn't just straight tempo and sweet spot.
I'm going to stop you there. We're going to get into the details on this. So like And you say this torque stuff that had some VO2 sprinkled in. What does the torque work look like? Are you looking at, so Matt was on the podcast previously, Matt Beers, talking about, he actually looks at like Newton meters.
Mhm.
But for you, are you just looking at like holding a power range at a certain cadence?
Yeah, which is the same thing. You know, the Newton meters is just those two combined. So I'll look at Newton meters. It's more for just my pure curiosity. And so it's just nice to look at a different number. Like once I realize like, oh, like, 320 watts at 50 RPM is this Newton meter, which is, I want to say it was like around 70 or something like that. Anyway,
It's just a different way to think of it.
It's just a different way to think about it. But you can get to the same Newton meters by decreasing your cadence, even if the power. So if you drop your cadence to 40, the Newton meters goes up, even though the power stays the same, and the RPE actually goes up too. So it's harder to push that same power. So
Interesting.
Even if you change cadence by like 3 RPM, the Newton meters will go up or down. So it is kind of a nice way to look at it, because you're focusing on one number instead of looking at two numbers.
Yeah.
So I don't look at it a whole lot, but every now and then if I want some different stimulation, then I'll look at the Newton meters.
And you set that up on your Hammerhead. It has a...
Yeah, you can just set Newton meters up as a data field on the Hammerhead, or any head unit will do it. I think most of them do it.
Yeah. Then when you say VO2 work is sprinkled in, are you doing accelerations out of those? So like how long would an interval be that you're doing this low cadence work in? And then are you sprinting out of them or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's anywhere from a few minutes long to 20 minutes long.
Okay.
And sometimes there's like accelerations off the top of them, or it's like accelerations in the middle of them. It's like sometimes you're just like, okay, here's the gear I'm in, and I'm just going to spin out this gear for 30 seconds or whatever it might be, which is just like a lot of force production, like mass. Basically, you're just kind of squeeze as many Newton meters out as you can. Yeah. Because you're just trying to force that like 50 RPM over to 100 RPM or whatever you can do in that time frame. So
a lot of work,
which is VO2 power. Yeah. At that point.
From this, and like from a physiological perspective, what we're working on here is you're trying to take, I mean, number one, if you send this stimulus of this like high torque need and demand on your muscles, it is going to make it so that the muscle fibers, they're enduring a lot of strain, more than they would if it was like or I guess a different type of strain than if it was a high cadence effort, but you're going to get more muscle fibers. So you're going to get the larger muscle fibers, more dense, everything else out of that. So yes, that's there. But you're also probably going through and converting over a lot of muscle structure to go away from this really like sugar hog nature of this fast twitch nature. And you're converting those fibers back over to being more efficient. Right. So then you don't just burn through as much carbs. Because once you get to the point where you're really like peaking for an event like Marathon Worlds, you're really focused on making sure your body can just like process as many carbohydrates as possible. And that's your main focus. But now after this, you're probably going back for efficiency a bit. Right.
Try and recalibrate a bit. But also like to step back a bit, I think I also really like torque work. So, this time of year, it's like, like the money's kind of in the bank. What you've done all year is what you have. And you're just kind of like fine tuning it. And like, you just need to keep doing some work. And, I talked to my coach, Jim, and I'm like, let's do a torque block. I really like torque. Like for me, it's like my favorite kind of training. Yeah. Like it's really stimulating for me because I think it was like you're focusing on cadence, you're like focusing on power, and you're not, it's just like I was kind of cracked on threshold because I'd done so much of it going into Marathon Worlds and Leadville and whatnot. That was like the main focus. Yeah. So I was like, let's do torque, and then we can do just a short VO2 block to sharpen up and then go in and do these races. And I think mountain biking too also is always inherently, like torque is always useful. Even a race like this where there's not a ton of torque, but you are like accelerating out corners and you're always like kind of turning over that lower gear sometimes. So I think it is helpful. But yeah, for me, I enjoy doing it, and like that's what I wanted to do to like mentally just be able to keep pushing and get, in the end you're just trying to get that TSS and get the training in. And then we just did a short little VO2 block, couple of days of 3 minute, 2 minute, 1 minute, some 30-30s, some 40-20s, kind of all the above.
Mix.
Just a mix of everything. Once again, just nice to keep it fresh this time of year, not doing anything that you feel burnt on. And out here, there's a lot of like 20 to 40 second efforts. So we felt like, some of those are always good. And those are nice because you get time in that zone without like completely torching yourself. So once again, it goes back to like feeling what you're doing. And like, if you go out and do like lots of like 5x5s or like some classic VO2 work, it's just like, it's too much. Like mentally, like I just can't really handle it right now and don't want to push that deep. Like the candle's been burning at both ends for a while now. So you kind of got to do what you're stoked to do.
Yeah. That's a good point with it. So let's talk about the other side of training, like the sweet spot, tempo sort of thing. Seems like it's really misunderstood by a lot of athletes. And especially by like amateur athletes. We have this like longevity style messaging that's out there about like just do zone 2, and then there's all the different ways to measure zone 2 and the different ways that people do it. And it's like zone 2 plus high intensity. And that's kind of the longevity messaging. That's also very similar to like the polarized approach to training as well. You're an athlete that like uses tempo and sweet spot pretty regularly throughout the season and like your training. Why? Like you mentioned before, you really enjoy certain types of training, so you like to do them. Is it just that you enjoy it, or do you find it to be race specific or build fitness better?
I think all the above, you know. Like I think, you know, being a gravel racer primarily, and then, you know, still racing mountain bikes when I can. Like these gravel races.
World champion. Yeah.
In these gravel races, when the race isn't on, normally you're still doing like kind of a low tempo or like high endurance pace in the group. So, you know, if you get comfortable riding that like kind of tempo sweet spot, like N plus, if you want to call it that, pace, then that just kind of becomes normal. And it, you know, makes you really metabolically efficient to be good at it. And that's like, for me, I can go out and ride and do hours and hours of tempo. I can just sit straight at the bottom of tempo and I can ride it all day long. And
which is weird. Like you're a bit different in that respect. Not every athlete can do that. And I don't think it's just a fact that like Keegan's really aerobically fit. If somebody's listening to this, from a coach perspective, they're like, oh, it's just because Keegan's aerobically fit. No one else, which you are. But the assumption or the implication there is that, well, if a person says they can't do that, it's because they're not aerobically fit enough. But you are a weird outlier in the sense that, yes, you're very aerobically fit, but you also can you have an ability, your body has an ability to dwell in that intensity realm for a really, really long time.
At any altitude.
Yeah. So and that's weird. That's not normal, like your ability to do that, you know? So there is that. I want to make sure that's like understood. But the thing is, like on aerobic efficiency, like I've been on some of these rides with you and you can just sit there all day. Like, and I don't even know, like, how do you fuel those rides? Because some people, if they're doing like a really long tempo and sweet spot sort of day, and one of the rides you've talked about, and we talk about a lot, is when you're riding end plus, so just above endurance, like dipping into tempo, then you let yourself go into sweet spot on the climbs. And then when you're coming back down the climbs, you still try to stay high endurance. You know, and like you just never really ease off. You also never drop the clutch.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, like your NP and average power is within like, you know, 5 watts. That's always my goal, is to make them as close as possible, because that means you're sitting in that power all day. So when you look at the zone breakdown of the ride, you're like, if it's a 5-hour training ride, I had 4.5 hours of zone 2. And maybe there's like, you know, 20 minutes of tempo, a little bit of sweet spot, and there's like ideally no zone 1.
Yeah.
Which is like only unless you're like, you know, you get like 10 minutes of warm up and 10 minutes of cool down at the end of the ride, just to get out of town, as the coach says.
Yeah.
And then, you just sit there. So,
yeah. And how do you fuel that? Because that's a huge, especially at your power too, like that's a big calorie day.
Yeah. Normally it's sitting, give or take, around 1,000 kJs an hour.
That you're burning.
That I'm burning. Yeah, give or take on those rides, because that's around 270, 280.
290, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the day, and how the workouts are before or after. Like if it's a really heavy week, I'll ride at the, you know, a little on the more conservative side and not push super hard or whatever. And some days I'm like, let it eat a little bit and ride a little bit more. But yeah, you know, I normally fuel with, you know, 90 to 100 grams an hour on those rides. Like at the high end, but not crazy high.
Yeah.
Some days I'll push it up a little more if I have a hard day the next day, just to make sure I'm not like going too in the red in terms of like burning too much.
Yeah. And you're doing that. You use Neversecond. It seems like you use like 60-ish grams of mix sometimes. Then you throw in a gel per hour.
Yeah. So I would do like 60 grams in the bottle. And then I'll do, you know, 1 gel or a bar. On those N plus rides, I'd like to use bars a fair bit, just because it's like the intensity is not quite high enough that I feel like I need to only use gels.
Yeah.
So the bars are kind of nice to have, like, that's like something to do. You can look forward to your little treat every, 30, 40 minutes or whatever your schedule is for eating.
Yeah.
So yeah, primarily bars and gels for those. And they all shift to gels near the end of the ride, do bars early. When the stomach, sometimes it's nice at the end of the ride. And yeah, if there's intensity sprinkled in those M plus rides, if there's VO2 or whatever it might be, then I'll turn it up to like 120 or whatever, and shift to more gel heavy.
Yeah. On VO2 days, I think I've seen in your training that you also like quite often like surrounding your intervals, like you'll still ride at end plus or that high endurance zone. So we're talking like somewhere around like 70-ish to like 80% FTP.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that in a lot of cases, even after your intervals, whether it's VO2 or threshold or anything else, like you'll finish it off with a block of riding at N plus.
Yeah, you just go straight back to the zone and just sit
lock
there
right
and
in.
suffer. Yeah, no, it's like, I think that's another kind of race specific thing is you get comfortable doing it. And then in the race, you're like, okay, like we finish this effort. And like, because in a race, you can do a 3-minute VO2 and you don't get to go straight back to zone 1 and coast down the hill, like you do in training.
Yeah.
You normally have to go back to like sitting at that like uncomfortable, whether it's middle of endurance, high endurance. Sometimes you do a 3-minute VO2 in a race straight into like a 30-minute sweet spot effort to like establish, like now you've made the gap.
Yeah.
But then you need to keep pushing.
Yeah.
And make sure the gap stays. So I think that's probably why we do that. So depending on the workout, but a lot of times, there is like N plus or tempo, like surrounding other work, whether it's threshold or whatever it might be.
We actually built out a lot of workouts like that in the catalog where you'll get you won't see that often in like a 1-hour workout, because in a 1-hour workout, like you don't have a whole lot of time to get in the work in a lot of cases. Right. If it's a lower level workout, then you might see that, or like you get in the intervals and maybe you're just able to do like 4x2 at this point or something. And if it's a really low level, then you'll have it. But usually it's like 90 minutes to 2-hour workouts. You'll see that.
That's a good way to, if you're, time pressed too, like for you guys at TrainerRoad, I mean, like you have 2 hours to train, like doing that higher endurance work after the like surrounding the intervals is just a good way to cram in more TSS. The difference in TSS between like a N plus ride and a regular endurance ride is, it's probably like 50 different.
It's big.
So it's like a whole extra hour you can fit in. Like a 5-hour endurance ride is the same as like a 4-hour hard endurance ride or N plus or whatever you want to call it. So it's basically, it's like you're kind of getting more bang for your buck, on what you're doing. And
this isn't to be clear, we aren't talking about doing endurance plus in between or tempo or whatever else in between your intervals themselves.
Sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do. It's, you might have a VO2 block and then you go straight into 30 minutes of, M plus or whatever, then into another interval set or.
Yeah. Which is, you'll see some workouts like that, but it's pretty rare. Because that's kind of hard to do when you're doing like a shorter workout, right? Like 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah.
But when
hard the VO2 is too, it's at the very top end if you need full rest. But man, the first like 10 minutes of getting back into that zone are pretty excruciating.
It hurts.
You just gotta like bite down for 5-10 minutes and let the heart rate calm down, and then you can kind of settle into it and it's not so bad. But
good mental training right there.
It is.
Yeah,
it feels like you're getting on the wheel,
Yeah,
You gotta like sit there. So, it's like mad attack. You're just sitting and staring at the hub for a few minutes. Like, okay, you just got to do this for 5 more minutes and then it'll get easier.
Yeah. Now this is, in between intervals, Keegan's still talking about going down to a recuperative pace in between an interval, but then it's all this stuff on either end of it. Do you think athletes don't use it enough, this sort of training zone? Because it's called the gray zone in a lot of ways and I think it was really by a lot of misinterpretations and misunderstandings of polarized training, but it was labeled and branded like the gray zone for quite some time on this like tempo to sweet spot range. Do you think athletes should use it more often, I guess, is the point?
I think so. I think, a lot of people hear that world tour riders are, doing polarized training, but when they're riding endurance, it's always hard.
Yeah.
They're not riding an easy endurance pace as you might think. You go out and ride and it's not quite full N plus.
Yeah.
But they're still riding. You're pushing hard.
It's 70 to 75% FTP.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah. So I think
oil's
kind of misinterpreted a little bit. Riding endurance is not just noodling at the top of zone 1, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It can be. If you it just seems like a waste of time though. You might as well just do a recovery ride at that point.
Yeah.
I think there is a time and place for that. We do those occasionally, on recovery weeks or in a big block. Sometimes a 3-hour endurance ride can be mega easy. And then, coach is okay, just take it easy today because we have a hard block coming. We still need to keep the motor turning. So we'll just do a 3 or 4 hour day at the very bottom of zone 2 and just kind of cruise along and get it done. But it's not a very regular thing, I guess.
No. Let's talk about sweet spot in particular, that zone. From what I've seen in your training, you use it, you pair that very frequently with that cadence work, like the lower cadence work.
It's probably that's what I mostly use sweet spot. We do occasional sweet spot work without it, but for the most part, it is paired with either high cadence or low cadence, mostly low cadence.
And then when you're looking at, like, you do threshold and that is what it is, but that sweet spot, that's depending on who is talking and how they measure it, 88 to 94-ish%, somewhere around there is typically where it overlaps. With that sort of effort, that also seems like a spot where I don't see a whole lot of work put in there, and a bit more threshold side of things. But what about like in base season? I think there's this theory that athletes, and I shouldn't say that I see that athletes don't use it. I see a lot of amateur athletes use it that are time crunched, but there's this vision that exists that, like, pros, when they're doing base training, it's just purely low intensity. And like that you guys never touch any sort of middle intensities or high intensities.
Yeah, I think that's
what does
kind
base
of
training look like for you?
I think it's kind of an old school way of thought. I mean, some guys still train like that, but I think that's the way that like base used to be.
Yeah.
You know, you would take like a month off the bike and then you would do like 2 months of just like riding 6-7 hours. And I think you can just get more, like I've found we can get more out of me if I push. We do like, you know, these hard 4 and 5 hour rides and like sprinkle in some sweet spot work with the torque stuff, and even just do some like traditional sweet spot efforts in base season.
And so you've got structure, intervals, that sort of thing,
lots of it.
All through base too.
Yeah, lots. We even start doing like a little bit of like lighter threshold work and whatever else in there. It's not just like your traditional kind of easy base. And I think especially as a, you know, time crunched like amateur, I think you need to sweet spot is the only. I wouldn't want to just go out and do. You're not gonna go anywhere. You're not gonna get anything done if you're just riding Z1 for an hour or two, and you don't have the time to go do 7 hours or 6 hour rides. And I think that's kind of what it takes. Is like, as a professional, we have like the luxury of feeling like, oh, I'm just gonna go do a 6 or 8 hour zone one ride, you know.
Yeah.
But you can get the same amount of work done, like, or close to it, in like 3 or 4 hours if you're really sitting on the pedals. You know?
Yeah,
and it's harder mentally. It's good too.
This is also coming, like, people probably don't know, and I don't want to say this out loud because somebody will be like, I want Keegan to be my coach. But like, this comes because you do coach like some people sometimes. And
occasionally.
Like an official coach of a person. So like, you aren't unaware of the constraints that an average athlete.
Yeah, mostly juniors, you know, like you're in high school, whatever else. So it's like, they're time crunched as well. You know?
They are. Yeah, that's how it works. So don't ask Keegan to be your coach, by the way, if you're listening.
Yeah, just use TrainerRoad.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that shows. Yeah, rainbow jersey. I guess that kind of like, I think on the intensity side, it all makes sense on the threshold and VO2 and all that sort of stuff. The last question I want to ask is sprint training. I don't know if you've seen, like, there's like studies that always look into some sort of extreme form of training. One of them that I'm thinking of is sprint intensity training. If I recall the study correctly, it was like 1 minute maximal efforts. And it was like doing like 4 or 6 of them in a session. And they tested that against, and this was with like a athletic population, but it wasn't like, you know, top athletes. And they tested that against athletes doing like more traditional aerobic training. And the people that just did the 4 to 6 all out 1 minute efforts for a certain period of time, they got faster. Yeah. Like they saw more improvement from it. But it's a pretty brutal way to train. Like 4 to 6, 1 minute. I don't know if anybody's done a 1 minute true all out effort, but the last thing on your mind is to do another one, let alone like 4 to 6. And then to know that like your training session in 2 days, same thing. In 2 days, same thing. And you got to stick to that for like a month. That I think I'm conflating this now, but there was a study that was like similarly intense, and the big problem with the study is that nobody wanted to finish it. So it was just too intense for too long.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I do have like my own theory of that. Like you only have so many full gas, like 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute efforts in you for like a season.
Yeah.
So if you're doing those all in training, then you're going to be just like so over it that your body just physically can't push anymore in the races. So I think there is like definitely a limit to that.
Yeah.
Like you only need to do enough to be good at it. You don't need to do more than you need.
This brings me to my question. That's perfect. Great segue, Keegan. It's like your pro podcast. How many times do you finish an interval and you're like sitting on the ground, starfished, completely exhausted, can't move? How common of an occurrence is that for you? Because from the outside in, we see athletes, pro athletes in particular, like film themselves during those moments, take pictures of themselves, and they look completely gassed. I never see that on yours ever, but that's a common thing. And I think that it gets a lot of us athletes thinking that we need to just empty the tank in our training all the time. Is that common for you? Do you find yourself completely laid out on the ground?
No, not really. Every now and then there are like, occasions where I'll like have to stop and like sit on the top tube for a couple minutes and just kind of recollect myself. But I think that if you're doing that regularly, you're probably doing too much.
Yeah.
Like I've been the victim of doing too much just because I get excited and, things, and they kind of derail yourself for a while. So I think, but yeah, no, that's just like, I think that's just athletes like dramatizing. It's the same thing about like collapsing on the ground at the finish. Like you can stand up, you can stay on your bike, you might be tired, but you don't need to lay on the ground. So I think,
calling me out. I'd sat on the ground after Leadville.
Sitting on the ground is but did you lay down and start?
No, I did not. I did not. I like
all the Nordic skiers do.
It's like you explode when they cross the line. It's like bombs.
Maybe I'm not going hard enough, but I think I think
sure.
I think no, I think that's just like athletes being dramatic, and I don't think you should strive for that because I think it needs to be repeatable. Like if you do that all the time, you're not going to want to train as much, and you need to always like, I think training, you kind of need to always leave one in the chamber. I think you need to like, there's a time and place to go hard in training and really push yourself. But I think if you do it too much, it's just, you're not going to be able to do it in the race.
Yeah.
And like racing, you should be nearly collapsed at the line. But I just don't think that's necessary. I don't think it's healthy. And
or even throw up when you cross the line. That's also an option, as we found out this year.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that too. That's pushing,
Yeah.
But in training, it should be like maybe once or twice a year that you feel like you're really, really pushing, and you're like, maybe I don't need to do that,
Yeah. That's our COO, Brandon. He's an incredible athlete, and he always operates on that same concept of like, look, man, like if I go all out and empty my tank in that training session, and like, don't get me wrong, if you have a workout, sometimes days are hard to get the work done, and you can't do it for one reason or another.
But normally you can't even push so deep to like blow yourself out.
That's
like, I had one of those days a while back where like I physically, like it means you're just tired, That's
right.
Like you can't, it's hard and you're like squeezing as hard as you can to work, but you're still like 50 watts off the power target if it's VO2 or whatever. And you're like, I can't go any harder. Like I'm physically like pushing as hard as I can, but you just can't get yourself to that point of full exhaustion.
Yes.
And that probably means you're not overtrained. You just need to like take a day or two easy and then try again. And you can probably go do those numbers. So.
Yeah, it's true. I think when you do those true all out efforts, you tap into a lot of like psychological strength and force, like mental strength and force.
Especially when you're alone.
Yes.
I think group rides are a really good place for that because you can hit the power. That's really hard to do in training, but in a group, it always feels a little bit easier. Like my best 1 minute power is always in the shootout at the end of the year when I'm racing like Quinn and these guys who are really good at 1 minute power. I'm always like fully maxed. It doesn't, if it's hard, don't get me wrong. Like you're you're wide open, but it's not nearly as hard. And I think it spends less of that mental energy than it does like doing these max efforts on your own. So I think like group rides, or even if you're just training with one other person, like if it's just you're going out with your buddy and you guys are going to do VO2 together, like even if have different power targets and you're doing your own workout together, you can still do the work and knowing that like, misery loves company. So if you're out there suffering together on the same hill, it's great. Russell and I do a fair bit of that in Tucson. I've done it with Matt in Utah when he was training. It's like, we'll do our own work and we're both on the same hill, like doing our thing. And just knowing someone else is there you can always push a little bit more because no one wants to be the one who taps out of the workout.
For sure.
It's good to have a little like friendly, it's not really competition because you're not really racing.
Yeah.
It just keeps you both accountable.
And it kind of like, it reserves that mental energy.
It does.
It takes a long time to recover from that. And like you said, it does feel like there's like a finite amount of it. If you do it too regularly, you're just you're too spent, and there's something to be said.
And some athletes can handle a lot more VO2 than others, I think too. Like Sophia can handle a lot more than I can, but I can do a lot more sweet spot and like tempo than her, for example. So I think like I can't do the same VO2 work she does and vice versa. Another thing I like to do sometimes on VO2 days is like, instead of like staring at the clock the whole time, you're just like, all right, I'm just going to go to this stop sign, or I'm going to go to this tree.
Yes.
And you just like do your laps and you have your little tricks. So like, okay, I'm just going to go to here and I'm just going to go, especially with like a 1 minute effort, if it's nearly all out.
Yeah.
You don't need to look at your power meter. You just need to just
go.
Just go. You just hold it wide open and go. So,
And then you can kind of, you figure out like what a minute is. You're like, cool, that's my landmark.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do.
Yeah. Instead of like staring at the whole time. And some days, sometimes you're 58 seconds, maybe you're a minute 2 or whatever. So it's like close enough. It doesn't really matter, you know?
Yeah. Agreed. Keegan, this is cool to get the insight into how you think about training from one of the world's best. I hope everybody listening to this has appreciated this time that Keegan set aside for us to give us this insight. Keegan, you're going to race Big Sugar after this one when people are listening to this. So if people are in Bentonville, go cheer Keegan on, watch the live stream, and go support the sponsors that support Keegan. He's wearing a Santa Cruz Bicycle sweatshirt right now and a Roca hat. So go and support those.
Sit down in the sun, put the glasses on.
That's right. Wise man. So that's it. If you want to get faster, a lot of the stuff that Keegan talked about today, you can find it in TrainerRoad because we don't subscribe to dogma or trends or anything else. We just subscribe to sound training science. So you can find that in there, and AI can tailor the workouts to you. It's pretty exciting stuff. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.